I would like to start by thanking everybody who was able to make it. The session is being recorded because we have a few people who wanted to join us, but who are unable to join us. And so it's okay for those people who are in the audience. You can ask your questions using the chat if you don't want to be on the camera, but when you have a Q&A towards the end of the session, you will be more than welcome when invited to, and when you raise your hand to switch on your camera and speak in person. But if people prefer not to do that, it's okay. You can still ask your questions via the chat function. So today, what we are going to do is we'll be sharing the work of the Center for Voluntary Sector Leadership over the last number of years, and what we have called the local learning clubs. I'm very sure you hear more from my colleagues who are going to speak. And I think I'm going to ask Daniel to start and introduce the Center for Voluntary Sector Leadership. Daniel, over to you.
Thanks, Fidel. Hopefully you can see and hear me. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to contribute today. I think it's going to be a really interesting session. So CVSL, the Centre for Voluntary Sector Leadership, is based in the Department of Public Leadership and Social Enterprise at the Open University Business School. And it was established in 2016 thanks to a philanthropic gift from a gentleman called Anthony Nutt. And that funded the first 3 years. And the last few years, we've been very grateful to have continued funding from the Open University and particularly the Faculty of Business and Law. So that's where we started off. And the focus initially for CVSL was on small and medium-sized voluntary sector organisations. And that was because often we felt often those organisations were a little bit overlooked in voluntary sector research and society generally, you could argue as well. So we wanted to draw attention to those types of organisations that might be operating locally without much fanfare, maybe what we would call below the radar, very small organisations, perhaps the ones that just rely on volunteers completely, or have small amounts or relatively small amounts of funding. So that's where we started from and what the focus was. And CVSL aims to combine 3 aspects of different elements of work, which we look at as a bit of a triangle, and they're research, practice, and teaching. So the research that we do is really what you might think of as the sort of typical academic stuff, but we try and make sure we have a real focus on what that research means in practice. So, for example, we've done some recent research during COVID on local infrastructure support, and we've been speaking with people in those organisations to get insight into what they've been dealing with on a day-to-day basis, but also that helps us understand what leadership is like in that context from an academic point of view as well. So that's how it feeds into practice, and an important part of practice as well with CVSL are events like this one today, and our annual conference, and the work that we do in talking with different practitioners in different contexts. So that's really good. And the third element is teaching, and part of the main thrust of that for CVSL were the free courses that were developed during the first sort of year or so of CVSL's existence. And so that really forms one of the key aspects of CVSL's outputs as well, and fed into what became the learning clubs. Because what we found really was that some learners, some were comfortable just learning online and having the materials and accessing them as and when they wanted to, but some people wanted more of an interactive, peer-to-peer, face-to-face way of learning and sharing information, and felt that really supported them in applying the learning from the courses into practice, so that they could use and have those conversations with people and think through in a reflective way how they would put those things into practice. So that's where the learning clubs came from. People also wanted to create or try and create learning communities as well, that could go on to do additional things beyond and outside and in advance of the courses that CVSL offers. One of the main benefits of the clubs, as we'll hear later on from other people's contributions, is that they're confidential, which helps encourage people to share, to have honest discussions about the challenges that they face, the good and bad things, and to develop trust among different groups, which is really, really helpful and really beneficial. However, having said that, a lot of people wanted to do the clubs face to face, we have have done some online, which is really useful for participants if they're spread around geographically in different parts of the country or the world, and also really helps for people if they may have, let's say, for example, accessibility issues, getting to face-to-face venues, etc. Or, of course, if conditions change, and we saw that with COVID, and we had a learning club that went online, was face-to-face and went online during the COVID period. So we've seen how that can be a big benefit. In terms of how the learning clubs work, CVSL academics can help to support the clubs, or they can also operate completely independently. And we have a facilitation pack that's available for people on our website, and I'll put the website link in a moment to the chat box. And that can be used in lots of different ways by different people. You can have individuals who become facilitators, or groups themselves can share facilitation or do it in a collective, collaborative way as well. And I think it's important as well to point out, as I'm sure Maddie will mention later when she speaks, that the learning clubs, as I mentioned earlier, can have benefits beyond just the courses themselves, and really act as a way for people to become more empowered in terms of their own leadership journeys and develop their both sort of their careers and personal private lives as well. So as I mentioned before, the courses are the learning clubs are based on the free courses that CVSL offers, and I know that our colleague Dr. Owain Smolovich-Jones is going to give us a little bit of information about that now. So over to Owain, and thanks.
Hi there, my name is Owain Smolovich-Jones. I'm a leadership academic here at the Open University Business School. I'm also director of the Research into Employment, Empowerment and Futures Academic Centre of Excellence. I'm also one of the people who started and wrote the leadership programs you're thinking of studying through CVSL. So in my academic life, I'm associate editor of the journal Leadership, and almost entirely write about issues around leadership and power and developing leadership. I did my PhD in studying leadership development programs, big ones in the public sector, in local government, defence, fire and rescue service, and out in New Zealand as well, across civil servants. So one of the really powerful things that struck me while studying leadership development programs, particularly in local government, was the emphasis they had on place, and particularly the idea back in the dying days of the former Labour government under Gordon Brown, where they introduced this idea of total place, which came out of the leadership program I was studying. The idea basically being that you can offer lots of added value to an area by bringing together disparate stakeholders, eliminating duplication, but also encouraging innovation in a particular geographical place. Now, you know, that kind of idea, which is a really good one, I thought, and had started to get ahead of steam, clearly in the ensuing decade kind of suffered a bit and started to flag and was replaced by alternative ideas. But nevertheless, when you ally that with an idea around leadership and bringing together lots of different stakeholders in an area, I think you get something potentially quite powerful, which is a group of people discussing how they can develop leadership and their experiences in developing leadership, allied with together making a real big difference to their locality. That locality could be, you know, a particular patch of England, Wales, Scotland, what have you, or it could be, you know, more specific around a sector, a subsector even within the voluntary sector. So one thing really that did concern me, and this is a very open university thing to say really, was the expense of studying leadership development programs, which is really significant, you know. And together with some colleagues, I felt really uncomfortable about the fact that some of these ideas around leadership had such a high price tag, really, which made them inaccessible to people we thought make a massive difference to leadership. Because, you know, we view leadership as a practice really that can be enhanced or contributed to by anyone, really. It doesn't have to be very senior people within organizations, and it definitely doesn't have to be really big organizations with deep pockets. So we wanted to make the kind of learning material that we would share on sort of big high status programs accessible to anyone for free, anyone who had a passion and interest in making a difference through leadership. So inspiring the courses is a view of leadership I've just alluded to, really, as leadership as a practice rather than as a person. And the way to differentiate this really is to just think in terms of verbs and nouns. So a noun is a person or a thing, and it's really the dominant way, I guess, of viewing leadership, which is leadership is the sort of property of someone senior, and you can kind of track and mimic their personal characteristics and seek to duplicate those of, you know, inverted commas, successful leaders. You know, that definitely has its place up to a point. But a more powerful way of viewing leadership, I think, is as a series of practices. So it's a verb. So leadership really, in this perspective, is the collective property of a group, because it's what you do together that makes a difference. And the other distinguishing feature here of leadership is leadership isn't the same as management, right? So leadership is about breaking paradigms, challenging conventional thinking, putting your heads together and taking action that can make a difference on really big, intractable issues. And who better to do this kind of leadership than voluntary sector professionals who can come together and by their collective endeavours really outmatch anything they could pull off alone. So that was the kind of inspiration behind the courses, if you like, and it's particularly relevant to voluntary sector leadership, I think, because, you know, you're the people who are sort of most in touch with the people you're representing. You understand their day-to-day issues, and you also have a high degree of expertise. So all these things come together, if you like, to present a potentially very powerful intervention that you can make in practice. And the courses are very much geared towards sort of practical experience. So they will sort of introduce you to really the main and most up-to-date approaches and theories to leadership, but they do so in relation to practice. So they'll constantly push you back to reflect on what you're doing in your day-to-day work life. They'll encourage you to have conversations with your colleagues and with your peers across the voluntary sector as well. But I think we realized when we were developing the programs that online learning, although we provide discussion forums that can be very energetic and valuable, there's an extra value, you know, to having a kind of hybrid model where you get together with peers and colleagues and discuss what you're learning, which is something we called learning clubs, which my colleague Fidel has been leading. And they can be a very powerful way of blending that kind of face-to-face contact, or, you know, online contact as well, but where you see another person with the experience of doing the courses together. So doing them in tandem is a really useful thing to do. Yeah, and so coming together face to face, you know, combined with learning something flexibly in your own time online is a really powerful way of learning. And I think it's kind of encouraged things that you can never predict these things in advance, but it's been really, really heartening to see some of the groups grapple with this thing that we call leadership. So, you know, for example, we did a learning club with a very impressive hospice organisation, and we attended, you know, a number of those clubs. And what was really powerful was how the material, allied, of course, with the brilliance of the staff, seemed to provoke a brilliant kind of ethical reflection on practice, which was really quite a moving thing to watch. And then elsewhere, we've seen examples of people who previously had very little contact with one another, or didn't know each other at all, actually, in an area, come together to start some really important, powerful local collaborations to address things like racism and inequalities, and so on and so forth, which has been absolutely brilliant to see.
Yeah, thank you, Owen. Sorry for people who had some difficulties, obviously, hearing what Owen had to say. It is pre-recorded. He is not with us, but the video will be available, and you can listen to it after the session. So all you need to do is just drop us a line, and then we make sure that you get the link and to the video. Without further ado, I'm going to ask Maddie to come and tell us about her experience as a facilitator of a local learning club. She will start by introducing herself, and then she will tell us what she learned and her takeaway from her experience. Over to you, Maddie.
Hi, so yeah, my name's Maddie Cassell, and I am currently, as you can see, working with an organisation called Lex Scotland, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But my first experience of coming across these courses and doing the learning clubs was in a previous role with a disability rights organisation. I work as a project manager in the third sector, so I come into a lot of different organisations and run projects. And my brief for this particular project, funded by the National Lottery, was to pilot a programme for lived experience leadership, which is based on the work of someone called Baljit Sandhu. The idea being we had 18 months to try out lots of different things that would help people with lived experience, and in this case specifically disabled people, on a leadership journey. So the program that I created to pilot consisted of lots of different strands. All of the 12 participants were actually selected for as diverse as possible as a group of 12 people could be. So we had age ranges from 24 to 87. We had a wide variety of educational backgrounds, from people who had not completed high school through to people who were conducting postdoc research. In a small group. They took part in shadowing experiences where they shadowed third sector and private sector leaders. They took part in some skills programs with other organisations, everything from IT to facilitation. And when I was looking for potential ideas to try, I came across the Developing Leadership in the Third Sector course and thought it looked great. And so we set up as a study group. And honestly, it really was an absolutely amazing experience for me. So over the course of, we took 12 weeks to do it, 2 weeks in between each course, between each session. When I originally started the program, the plan was we were going to all meet face to face. I started the program late in 2019. So as you can imagine, that didn't quite go to plan. So we ended up running the study groups online as Zoom meetings, which was, to be honest, went surprisingly smoothly. It was really good, and it did really enable a lot of engagement we had people from all over Scotland working as part of the program. What we got out of the study group, obviously it was a heavily evaluated project as a pilot project, so I won't bore you with details. But I think the two key things the participants said that they got out of being part of the study group and completing the course, one of which they said they were much more able to identify as leaders by the end of it. So at the beginning, a lot of them were saying, well, we're on this leadership training course, but we don't currently consider ourselves leaders. By the end of the program, they were all saying, actually, we do now identify as leaders. I think in part that was because of the approach and the materials, which Daniel and Owen were talking about. The leadership as practice model, certainly the participants in my study group found that it was a much more inclusive model, particularly for disabled people, but also those there were people in the group facing many other challenges on their leadership journey: gender, race, educational background, and they found this concept really, really useful for exploring for exploring, you know, their ability to be leaders and to act and practice leadership. So some of that came from the materials, but also a lot of the feedback, they said a lot of it came from being part of a study group. One of the things that I'll admit I was slightly nervous about tackling an academic-based course with people with such a wide variety of backgrounds and educational experiences. It really enabled a lot of skill sharing. Having a study group that was meeting regularly, that was able to build trust, they were able to get to know each other, meant that it was a lot easier for people to speak up if they were struggling with something. There was a lot of skill and knowledge sharing going on. So although I was facilitating the group, it was a very, very light touch for facilitation. I booked the sessions, I organised the Zoom meetings. I gave a little nudge sometimes if the conversation didn't start flowing, but really, honestly, it was almost as if they were able to practice the collaborative leadership that they were learning about within their study group and really put it into real life practice. The other thing that I think we really got out of having the study group was, Owen and Daniel brought it up, was the ability to talk about how we could apply it in practice. So we were able to take these theories and ideas and concepts, and we were able to talk about, okay, how would they apply it in the organisation that they were working with, or the organisation they were shadowing as part of the mentorship programme. We were able to have those discussions about, well, what does this mean for disabled leaders? What does this mean for lived experience leaders? And really pull the theory into our practice and think about how it would apply. So that was really exciting. I'm aware I have a time limit on me, and I promised I wouldn't talk too much. So I wanted to just touch briefly on what happens next. So unfortunately, as things often go in the third sector, pilot projects unfortunately don't always end up going into full development. So I've now moved on to project manage with a different organisation. But what we got out of that programme was so powerful for me, I didn't want to lose it. So I'm now in the process of setting up a new organisation, Lex Scotland. And we're actually bringing a lot of what I learn and some of the others learn in the group to bear on how we actually develop this brand new organisation. We're bringing in the idea, well, how do we start with, you know, building an organisation that embeds this idea of leadership as practice and of collaborative leadership rather than the traditional person-based models. So we're actually planning to start in November our own study group to complete the second course. And this will be a very different study group. We're all planning to form an organisation together. Effectively, we will be the board or whatever happens. And we're essentially using it as our organisational onboarding. And what it will enable us to do, and I know from, you know, having done this before, what we are planning to do is to take the course materials and in our study group, instead of applying it to disability or lived experience leadership, we'll be looking each week and say, okay, well, what does that mean for us as an organisation? What does that mean for how we set things up? What does it mean for what processes we create in our organisation? So obviously we haven't quite started that. We're hoping to start mid-November with that, but you know, we'll be building on a lot of what I took from the previous programme and applying it in a similar but different way for us to develop our organisation at Lex Scotland. So I'm very, very excited about that. So I'll be available for questions and answers at the end. It feels slightly odd talking to a blank wall, I have to admit, but please do. I'll be sticking around to the end of the session. So if you've got any questions about the the program and how we run the study group, or any questions about the feedback that we got from the participants, I'm really happy to answer them. And thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Maddie. It's great, and I'm very sure people will be asking you questions. And I'm keeping an eye, as I said. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, so hopefully people will be asking questions, and we try to answer and cover as many as possible. I'm pleased to say that Reverend Dr. Kadiva is with us now, and I think my tech colleagues are going to allow him to unmute himself and switch on his camera and tell us his experience of being a participant in a learning club that was we ran in East Africa. Over to you, Reverend Dr. Kadiva. So introduce yourself when you start, and the floor is yours. Yeah, so I'm not sure what is happening. I hope the system has not let us down.
He's available to present.
Yeah.
I can't unmute him, but he's.
Yeah. Okay, so can we unmute him?
I can't do it from here. He needs to do it himself, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. So I think while we wait for him to unmute himself, Kay, are you there? Oh, hey, he's there. Okay. Thank you. Unmute yourself, Reverend Dr. Kadiva.
Hello.
Yeah, so the floor is yours. So introduce yourself and then tell us about your experience with the Learning Club, the VM Learning Club. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. I've tried hard to link with you, but of course now I've managed to link. Of course, the experience which from this Learning Club with that, from it I came to discern about the what I can call paradigm shift in the church, and also in the church leadership. But also I came to learn about being able to adapt the new system of in organizations, and also the aspect of teamwork and the organization structure, that wherever there is any changes in the organization, that means it has to go down to the stakeholders rather than be made from the top leaders themselves. And currently we had an organization structure in one of our churches here, and they discovered that those who thought that it is important to restructure the organization were the leaders, but and this kind of restructuring was top-down approach rather than starting from the bottom to top leaders. So it is through this this leadership club that I was able to recall skills which I received from this training, and I encourage the church not to start from the top-down approach, but also to involve the stakeholders to be part and the parcel of the organization structure. And I managed to encourage them, and they adopted this, and that kind of discussion of organization structure, it went well up to this moment. But also I came to see that through this leadership club, I came also to see the importance of information sharing that is very crucial in the leadership of today. That without able to share information, then it becomes so difficult to run the organization. And also information is something which can formerly used, there are people who used to monopolize the information, but now information is no longer, we cannot monopolize it. Nobody has monopolized the truth. So you can also get information or the truth from others. So these are some aspects which I really learned from this leadership club. And right now I'm writing a book on church leadership. Thank you.
Before you go, I have realized, you are very quick and went straight to the point. You didn't introduce yourself, and maybe tell us something about who was part of your learning club, and maybe tell us something about VEM before you go.
Yeah, I'm Pastor Ernest William Kadiva. I'm working with the United Evangelical Commission as a Deputy Executive Secretary, Africa Region. So that is, and this United Evangelical Commission is a communion of churches. It's more church organization. It works in 3 continents, that is Europe, and mainly German, Africa, and Asia. And it just follows the roots of missionaries who went through this continent to bring the gospel. Now, United Evangelical is working on the 5 pillars, that is development, partnership, evangelism, diaconia, and the advocacy. So these are the main pillars of United Evangelical Commission. But also we are now embarked on the what we call global. We call it global learning ecumenical perspective. We understand that we have to learn from each other in order to be able to be compatible or to harmonize how we can work together. So there is no way we can work together without learning from each other. So this is the United Evangelical Commission, the organization which I'm working in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kadiva. I'm very sure there'll be some questions. Sorry, you are muted.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to repeat what you just said?
Oh, should I repeat it again?
No. I think you had some closing remarks just before you switched your mic off. Otherwise,
yes, I said that. I just said that this is the United Evangelical Commission, the organization which I'm working in.
Yeah, that's fine. So do you want to tell us which countries participant in your running club came from and how you are able to meet online?
Yeah, I'm right now I'm in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And of course I came to meet with my brother Fidel through Reverend John Wensley Kabango, who is the Executive Secretary, Africa Department, who is now in Vupata. But right now he's visiting our country, and he was eager to participate in this meeting, but he failed because he's in a place where there is no network connection. But he sent greetings to all of you, and this is the one who really linked us with Fidel and of course this Open University for this program, and the Center for Voluntary Sector Leadership. But now we have also encouraged our young people to join this club, and they've joined this club, and they're really looking forward to see how we can proceed, because it has enriched them, and some of them, they are doing volunteer work, not in different parts of the world. So they found that this is so enriching, and they're eager also to continue with this program right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are some questions in the chat. We'll come back to the questions after. So you know, hang on, and then we talk to you later towards the end when we have the question and answers. So before we go to Kay, who is a PhD student who has been observing our learning clubs, I have invited Jenny, who is considering starting a local learning club. So Jenny, if you can hear me, see me, you know, the floor is yours. Start by introducing yourself, and you tell us why you feel the learning club as well as the courses will add value to the work you are doing for the community in Milton Keynes and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Genevieve Wilmama. I am the current secretary 2021 to 2023 of Igbo Union Milton Keynes. Just from the name, we are Igbos, and Igbos are from West Africa, Nigeria precisely, who happen to be living in Milton Keynes. So we invited Fidel to one of our meetings. It's a free meeting that we hold every last Saturday of the month. So as a pattern gift, Fidel came to talk to us about other things. We belong to the Milton Keynes Intercultural Forum and Arts and Heritage Alliance. So he came to observe us, and as a parting gift, he also introduced the CVSL to us. As a parting gift, he gave us links to some courses that are run by the Open University. So we, as a union, looked at it, and we formed some groups because we are familiar with the Zoom since COVID. So we tried to start with the leadership within, so that we wanted to internalize it. Although we have our own kind of leadership, we also looked at what the text wanted to look at what the text is saying, to see where we share some similarities, and to take it from there. So we tried with the executives, and we noticed that we have communities and leaders of each community, and they were also interested. So we started the first group. We formed the WhatsApp forum for that, and interestingly, we had a lot of women. There were 2 men, and then because of the nature of most of the job most of us do, we never really had a good timing for consistency and regularity. So yes, and going by what Owen said, this voluntary sector leadership, because we are a voluntary group, and we found out, trying out the learning about collective, like group learning, what actually brings us together is the meeting every last Saturday of the month. And some of us know others, but to be in a group, we also discovered learning together, and people started to get to know themselves better. And like Maddie said, we also had challenges in educational background, because we come from diverse environments. Some are qualified, some are not, didn't go to school, but have got some street wisdom about them, and from age and what they have acquired along the years. So we needed to have a balancing act, and some are withdrawing because of certain personal barriers. So we did the very first lesson, and we allowed ourselves to choose, and everybody tried to internalize leadership. And what came out from it was that we all have families, and the job we do within the family itself is leadership, because we are all parents. Then we also looked at our positions in Igbo Union Milton Keynes. So the first time we tried and we played around logging into the system and using Zoom, and everybody liked it. There were awkward moments, but we passed through that scale. So the first we did was we allowed ourselves to look at all the courses available, and there were a legion of them. So we started with the leadership ones. I think they were about 2. Some were 3-hour courses and some were beyond 3 hours. So we decided how to be making it in, acceptable chunks, like 35 minutes, 45 minutes every other time. So we did leadership roles in public space. And surprisingly, after watching the clip, everybody was allowed to explain what they understood by the word leadership. And you'll be surprised, a lot of things came out from it. Somebody said it was ownership. Another person said it was like being the driver. Somebody else said something about strategic planning, and then collaboration. So we looked at it in terms of leadership within the community. And somebody said collaboration and maximization. We found words that, did it for us before. After then, we went through it in turns. So it demystified the fear. Some people entertained about going it alone. On your own, you couldn't do much because you already had the link. You could always go back to it. But then finding the time was a struggle. But when we came together, there were, entertaining moments and people were allowed to talk. So it took the fear away from looking at the script and putting one on the spot to explaining what leadership meant. So he made people talk. So we talked about public health, community engagement, and the presence, build relationships. We talked about the purpose, the value, and engagement. We looked at size. We looked at varying ways. So people came in and there was a lot of participation. And then that is what we did. Next one, you might not really find people, and there are people who would like you to bring out your time and teach them personally, as if it's a thought process. So these are the challenges I met, but people are welcome to it. Everybody is interested in getting the certificate, and it's just the time for me. Thank you. Hope I haven't stayed long. Hello.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenny. No, it's perfect. So before we open up the room, because I see we have already some questions for Reverend Dr. Kadiva, and one which is addressed to the rest of us. Before we open up, while we give people the opportunity to look at the chart, ask question, Kay, can you come on screen and then share your observation from the work we have been doing over the last 2 years or so, going around and observing what is happening in the learning clubs.
Certainly. Thank you. Thanks, Fidel. Hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. I'm Kay Logan. I'm a PhD student, and in the rest of my time, I work with NHS leaders around leadership development. And I've been following leadership learning clubs for the last 2 years, as Fidel has said, I think 6 learning clubs, and they've been a variety of face-to-face and virtual. Some of them have been in other parts of the world, and some of them have been very local to this country as well. And what I wanted to share with you, I suppose, is now I have that 2 years of experience as looking at what seemed to work with learning clubs. I thought I'd share some of that with you, and hopefully it touches on some of the questions that are starting to emerge as well. So if we start with where Owain started, you know, about this idea of leadership being more of a practice. Well, what I was interested in, what does that actually look like when people come together? And that's what basically my PhD looks at as well. It's trying to understand what is it that happens when people start to work together more collectively, more collaboratively? What does it look like when leadership is a practice? And how are those really difficult issues grappled with as a consequence of working in a slightly different way? So that I think the first thing I would offer is, if you are thinking of starting a leadership learning club, is do use the resources that are available online. So that's the course materials, the discussion forum particularly. And one tip with the discussion forum is make sure that you subscribe to all responses, because then you'll see people coming in and adding to the kind of stuff that you're posting as well. And without subscribing in that way, you won't see that. So there's a really big opportunity here for you to do that. And I think one of Maddie's questions was around the benefits of a learning club rather than individual learning. Well, you can actually approach the discussion forum together as a learning club as well. And what that gives you is the opportunity to use a different kind of medium to learn together, but also try to tap into others who are coming to the discussion forums as well. So there's a real opportunity there. There's also a learning journal that you can use via the online courses as well. So again, that's another, if it really works for you, you know, kind of reflecting on what you've done and writing about that, that's a really good way to do that as well. I think learning together is one of the biggest advantages of a learning club. And what I mean by that is if you are all approaching the online materials at the same time, and you kind of have an agreement by the next time that you meet, you will have covered X, Y, and Z. What that then gives you is the opportunity to use the materials as a springboard, but then apply them in all sorts of ways. I mean, Maddie talked about this with the work that she'd done particularly, and that's one of the things I did notice. It's the way that the materials are used, that they become lived almost, and you can then apply to your practice and think about what that actually means. What am I going to do differently as a consequence? The leadership issues that started to emerge in the learning clubs were really fascinating. And what I noticed is, as we experienced the death of George Floyd, for example, and how COVID-19 started to emerge, those kind of big issues that the voluntary sector were facing attached to those two areas I've just mentioned did come into the learning clubs, and it was clear that voluntary sector organisations were grappling with lots of difficult problems as a consequence. So it's an opportunity to hear how others are tackling the leadership issues that they're facing, and for you to share yours, and actually to change practice as a consequence. And you know, you use your learning club as a means to checking that out and, you know, bringing back progress. And then I suppose that the last thing I'd say is to challenge yourself in the learning clubs in how you think and approach your leadership practice. What is it that you can do that perhaps embodies this kind of approach that we're kind of suggesting here? So not just the what, but how are you going to do that? And I think that that's the benefits that learning clubs give, rather than that individual learning that tends to be more time driven. What I notice in terms of posted from individual learners is that they'll post onto the discussion forum in a cluster of time, and that just makes me reflect on that there's possibly an opportunity being lost in terms of deepening that learning. So I hope that's useful. I'll not take up too much time, but look forward to some of the questions that emerge. Thank you. Thanks, Fidel.
Thank you, Kay. So I note that there was a question actually from Maddie to Reverend Dr. Kadiva, which was asking him to talk about the difference between being part of a learning club and being an individual learner on our online platforms. I wonder if Kadiva, if you are available, could you unmute yourself and then switch on your camera and then respond to Maddie, please?
Well, I see my camera is not working. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. If the camera is not working, proceed without the camera.
Yes, I don't know why. Let me check. Is it working now?
No.
No. Maybe I'll shift it to another system which might work better. Let me join this. Let me connect it to other laptop, which I might think it can work better. But what you have said is that from learning club and as an individual, from this program, I really found to be very fruitful, as I've said. But on the aspect of approach and leadership, there are so many ways to approach leadership. But also we have this problem of conservatism. That means to adapt a new kind of leadership. This is a difficult issue in our church as a voluntary organizations. The kind of leadership which has been accepted, which has been approved to be that is a leadership, and it's more historical than the leadership which is now taking place in the world, which is also affected by or dominated by social media. And this is something which I really see as a challenge to voluntary organization, especially in our churches, because there are some values and there are a kind of taboos which are there to stay. And when you have this kind of new leadership, this new approach, that the church is so suspicious with a new approach of leadership. So it is also very challenging to practice it, because you have to, it's like you have to it needs the muscles not only the muscles, but it needs time to discuss with the stakeholders or the beneficiaries of that system. For example, in the church there is issue of gender, which is really a challenge when it comes to leadership. And the church is mainly dominated by men. And now when you bring a leadership which is also involve women, in some ways is a challenge to be accepted.
Looks like we have lost Kadiva. I wonder, so there was a question actually in the chat. So let me see if I can.
So you find that the dominant. I'm trying to join. Do you hear me?
Yes, we did. We are hearing you, but we lost you for a few minutes, so a few seconds rather. So maybe you can finish and then, yeah.
Yeah, this is what I said, the dominant approach in the church is mainly is on the aspect of male kind of leadership. So it is very, very challenging to bring a kind of to bring women leadership in the church.
Yeah, thank you. I see, Kate, you did. So, Kate, are you still around? If you are still around, because we don't have many people on the call, you will be more than welcome just to switch on your mic. I think it will be possible to do so, and then ask your question, and then I'll get the panelists to respond if we have the answer.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I'm really interested. It's not quite a voluntary sector, but I live in a very deprived area of near Jaywick and Clacton on Sea, and I'm trying to look at how different ways that I can get leaders together to do learning together. And this just looks such a good way of doing it because it's all these resources available. And I was just wondering if you could suggest which some of those courses might be particularly useful, and you know, if you've had anything like that happen and how you'd suggest sort of going about doing it, and any ideas of funding or anything that you could give me to help on those sort of ideas. So it's basically very small businesses, all family, in an area where hardly anyone's ever gone to university. So they've got very little knowledge of leadership theory and very precarious workforces, lots of care homes, and, you know, generally sort of precarity is a big issue here.
Yeah, I see, Maddie. I see you have switched on your camera. I'm assuming you have an answer. So you have a go ahead. Then I will get back to Kate.
I guess I think Daniel and Kay probably have a better perspective on the materials. However, one of the things I will say from, you know, I've just done the developing leadership course with a study group, although I have looked at the collaborative leadership course myself. One of the things I thought was fantastic about the materials was that they were very comprehensible. Like I said, we had in our group a really wide range of educational backgrounds, and they were comprehensible and accessible. But I think what is really interesting was that it's really interesting hearing what other groups and organisations have got out of it, because I think they're very much a starting point for discussions that the group can then take and apply in whatever direction they want to. So it's really interesting hearing that, you know, the journey we went on talking about lived experience and disabled leadership is very different to the journey the church went on, and the Milton Keynes group as well. So I think that in that sense, I would say either of them would be great because they are so flexible and adaptable. You know, it's up to the group where you take them. Yeah, I'll let the experts answer
now. Okay, Kate, I think what we'll do is we have to separate communication after the session. We have got a lot of courses, not only from the Center for Voluntary Sector Leadership, but from across the university, and some of them might be of interest. So let's have a discussion, and then we see if we can find a bespoke solution to the issue you are raising. I think that's a better way of looking at it. Tim, yeah, you are welcome to oh, you have a meeting. Okay. Are you going, Tim? Okay. No, I know. Tim has left. So, but we'll do some follow-up afterwards. Let me see. Anybody else? Daniel, do you have anything to add to what Maddie said?
I would say no, I've put an answer to Kate in the chat, just because we had the leadership pathway document, which is on the CVSL website as well. It's linked there, which does include a variety of courses that are available on OpenLearn that Louise has just linked to, which are free courses as well, and they cover a wide range of different Well, yeah, I mean, you go on Open Learning, so there are so many courses on there that are free and available to people and really accessible in terms of the whether you have an education background in education or not. So yeah, that could be a good place to start because it does go through lots of different things. So yeah, but also as I mentioned, I think one of the strengths of the CVSL courses is you can just dip in and out of them as and when you want to, and you don't have to, you don't have to follow week 1, week 2, week 3 if you don't want to. So it may be that there's some really useful material in there that you think, oh, okay, this can apply to a different context, a non-voluntary sector context, let's say, because it does talk about different approaches to leadership. It does talk about obviously collective, collaborative approaches to leadership practice, etc. And those concepts can apply in different contexts. So that might be a good place to start. Might take a little bit of adaptation, but I'm sure there'll be some helpful stuff in there. Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. And I see we have only so Christopher, Jill, and Marcus. I think it makes sense to open the floor for everybody who might have some sort of remarks to make, and then we go around the room and get some closing remarks from our speakers, and then we will bring the session to an end. Christopher, you are gone. Oh, okay. Okay. So I see what has happened now. Jill, any comments? Sorry for putting you on the spot. We have a rep from Scotland. You might have too.
It's okay, Fidel. I've put you on the spot before, so it's only fair. I've just been enjoying listening to the different experiences of using the course. We started sharing the course with voluntary sector leaders in Scotland some time ago, and there's a lot of interest in setting up leadership clubs. So I was particularly interested in hearing Maddie's experience. So I was wondering if I could ask kind of a minor question, but a practical one, in terms of what platforms worked well and how they went about facilitating the groups. Did the person who was a facilitator do the course first, by themselves, and then adapt it for a group situation? So they're kind of practical. One is the technology you used and how well it worked, and the other is about the facilitator.
So yeah, have a go, Maddie, and then I'll get in.
Yeah, good questions. Particularly in the light that all the participants I worked with were disabled, accessibility was very important for us, and we had the quick change from face to face to online. So actually I looked into a lot, and I know there is controversy, but we found as a group and with the organisation I was working at the time, Zoom was by far and away the most accessible online platform, and in my opinion remains so. And I don't just mean that in terms of, subtitles and aids and supports. Things like, on this call, we've had a lovely demonstration of you can have issues with connectivity, and particularly working in somewhere like Scotland, where we had people joining from remote islands and all sorts of different places. We found Zoom was also the most stable platform in that sense. It was the easiest to maintain connectivity. In terms of facilitation, we actually had an interesting program. So within the organisation, there was also a junior member of staff who wanted to develop their facilitation skills. So we had several levels. As the project facilitator and the kind of primary facilitator, I did the materials alongside the group. So as they were reading the materials every 2 weeks, so was I. So I got my certificate of completion the same day they did. That was quite important to me. I use a lot of collaborative practice, and I think, for me, it was kind of putting into practice what we were learning, in the sense that I tried to keep it a very collaborative learning space. But I also gave opportunities to some members of the group who wanted to, and to other junior members of staff in my organisation, to have a turn at facilitating. which meant, again, it became more than just us doing the course materials. Actually, the study group itself was an opportunity for us to practice collaborative leadership, for other members of the group to practice their facilitation skills, and in that way. But like I said, I tried to keep it as light touch as I possibly could. So, within reason, we were all approaching that space as equals, which is also something that was very important to us in our practice as lived experience leaders as well. In order to be able to respect and value lived experience, we need to have an open, collaborative space where everyone is valued. So that was very important. So, yeah, the main role, I think I mentioned something, in my talk, I set up the meetings and I sent everyone reminders every week and set up the Zoom feed, but I tried to keep it as light touch as possible. And I was learning alongside everybody else.
Great, thanks, Maddie.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add, Jill, is there are many platforms which can be used. So obviously Zoom got a mention. We have used Microsoft Teams as well. The sessions we facilitated as Center for Voluntary Sector Leadership, we used Microsoft Teams. I know a few people have also experimented with, is it Google Hangouts? And I also know that WhatsApp has got those video conferencing, whatever facilities. So the platform is not the issue is how stable is the network connection, and then which set of system are the participant going to be comfortable with. In terms of facilitation, what we have done is we have developed a Facilitator Pack, which we can give to groups to help the facilitator to organize and host the learning club. I should stress that you don't have to be an expert too, because in some groups, actually, people learn together, as Maddie said, and a person volunteers to facilitate the session, let's say next week. So they will read in advance, but they don't have to be experts. Okay, so Kay, you wanted to say something? I see you put something in the chat.
Hi, I was just adding to what you were saying. So as well as the Facilitator Pack, we now also have developed a Participant Pack as well, haven't we? Some of the things to kind of think about when you're part of a learning club and learning together. And the other thing that I just quickly put is how one of the learning clubs actually switched around the facilitation around the group. So that they had practice facilitating as well, which was a really interesting idea. And building on what Maddie said about practicing, this kind of leadership practice that we're talking about, working together. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add. Thanks, Fidel.
Jill, yes, we can share the Facilitator Pack afterwards. So you know where I am, so I won't disappear. Email me, I'll send you the link. It's also available on our website, but I'll make an exception and email it to you directly. Who has not yet spoken? Marcus, you are still around. Christopher, you're around. Maybe if you have any comments and suggestions, please go ahead, and then we'll go around and ask the final one word to sum up their experience to all the speakers. And then I'll close the session. Marcus? Christopher? Okay, so as people are going quiet, then Marcus, yeah?
Yeah, nothing particularly to add. Very interesting. So I'll just eating a roll.
Okay, thank you. Christopher? Okay, that's fine. So now, yeah, so what I'm going to suggest is maybe I'm going to ask our speakers, starting with Daniel in the chronological order, just one final word, not a sentence, a final word.
My final word is going to be adaptability. There you go, Fidel.
Okay, perfect. Maddie.
You have put us on the spot, haven't you? I'm going to have to go for inclusive.
Okay, thank you. And Jenny, are you still around?
Yes, I am. I think I'll say it's a learning curve. So we remain open to all the tricks and all the challenges, and it makes us better too. Yeah.
Okay. Reverend Dr. Kadiva, you are still there? Okay. We'll go to Kay.
Thank you. Yes, that was putting us on the spot, that one. My word is springboard. Yeah, springboard. Yeah, thank you.
And my one is keep going. I mean, that's the lesson. So if you start, keep going and eventually get there. Kadiva?
Yeah, I feel this, as I've said before, this is a very enriching program, and maybe we needed to tailor more programs, especially on my side, on the voluntary organizations, the special churches, how the church, the thing which can lead a church to have it is ways of leadership.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we have to come back to that one. I don't have an answer. So just very few thank yous before we close the session. This would not have been possible without having the audience, because it's okay to speak, but it is great to have people listen to you. I would like to say thanks to the speakers, both those who are still around, Kadiva, Daniel, Maddie, Kay, as well as Jenny. But it would not have been possible without the team behind the scene. And I can think of Louise, Alice, and I'm very sure somebody did help with editing of the video. That's Matt. And so thank you very much for coming. And I'll also be saying, I'll be acknowledging and appreciating Owen, who unfortunately couldn't join us. And I should also add that there is a big team behind CVSL. So although myself and Daniel and Kay were here, there are more people behind us. So we are not on our own. So thank you very much. Highly appreciated. And we'll be hopefully producing a podcast out of this one here, so that we don't ask Maddie and Kadiva and Kay and Genevieve to come and repeat the same things all the time. So we'll hopefully produce some resources from this one here and encourage other people to start their learning club.